How stupid do we think we are is the title of this video. There are many times when we today, in our modern societies, look back on all of the times before and we marvel at their art, at their architecture, and we validate our ancestors as being highly intelligent people who were capable of great art, who were capable of great architecture, who made breakthroughs, advancements, and are the reason why we are what we are today. But there is one thing in all of the ancient great societies that we still have remnants of enough that we can study. There was one thing about them that we, in the modern era, completely believe that they are stupid about. And that is believing that the earth is flat. All of the great ancient cultures, from the Chinese dynasties to the Babylonian to the early Hebrew belief system of the cosmos, to the Egyptians and their beliefs of the afterlife and everything, even the Greeks, they all believed in a flat earth. It's all very well represented in the art and the architecture that they've left to us. It's no secret. It's even portrayed that these were all flat earth believing societies. But today, we do not accept as a wide cultural norm that the earth is flat. Indeed, it is viewed as being foolish, stupid. Like, you're one of those people who still thinks the earth is flat? What is the basis for this? Why do we value the inputs of our ancestors on every other dimension, and we even stylize them and make heroes out of them? And yet, all of these cultures and all of the literary figures that we have passed down from them, whether it's from Homer or Plutarch or even characters out of the Bible such as King David or Solomon or Isaiah or even Jesus himself, we take these characters from history and we say so much about them, what they did, how important they were to everything, how they affect our days and lives today, but we just omit from the recording the reality that these people believed, walked, lived, ate in a world that they considered to be flat, to be a dimensional plane of existence where there were dimensions beneath it, dimensions above it, but that the dimension of earth itself was one bounded by the confines of a firmament, an impenetrable dome that they couldn't get beyond. That stars are not huge gas bodies, billions and millions, gazillions of miles out into space, but that they're localized, that they're much smaller, that they have significant reasons to believe that there's even a language to be written in them. And that doesn't have to just depend on what the Bible says on it. Many cultures, many religions have a basis in telling you what the sky says based off of star locations. Why do we, as a modern culture, completely throw everything about the past to the wayside when we believe that they are stupid because they believe the earth was flat? How do we value all of the inputs that they given us into our modern era when everything that we relegate to them is something that is simply beyond intelligent, in the sense that they're not intelligent, because they could actually believe that the earth is flat. And they did. That is the reality that modern people skip over when they're looking at the massive size of the pyramids that are perfectly aligned to star constellations, only arrived at by basic geometry that has nothing to do with earth curvatures thrown in. These ancients, they figured out all of their exact calculations, measurements based on their flat earth perspective. They didn't use globe earth curvature calculations supplied by NASA. They didn't have any concept of the bounds of an earth of a 24,000 so many miles circumference with a radius of so many thousand miles, or spinning 1,000 miles per hour at the equator on a tilted axis that's rotating around the sun at 66 some thousand miles per hour in a galaxy that's traveling 515,000 miles per hour. They had no concept of these things. And yet the Mayan culture has a more accurate map of time and calendar for days and the accounting for leftover minutes through solstices and so forth than any current modern calendar can boast. How does an ancient culture that believes the earth is flat and has that as its mythology, has it represented in art, in their detail, in all of their buildings, how is that possible? How do they arrive at a perfect calendar, at least one more perfect than our modern Julian calendar, if they're believing and seeing and interpreting all of the cosmos through the lens of a flat earth believer, which is what they were, which is what history, archaeology will all say, all clearly define? How do we extrapolate the reality of their brilliance that we laud and tell them that they're so amazing and it was just cutting edge technology of its time? How do we say that when those calculations were derived from simple mathematical formulas that we have today, that people still utilize, and yet no one is throwing in curvature calculations or any of the other anomalies of space movement and a heliocentric model? In fact, these cultures clearly said that the sun and the moon were orbiting bodies within the dome itself. I mean, is it stupid of us in the modern era, really, to just turn our head away from all of this history of a people that we congratulate on every other level, whether it's laws of democracy, whether it's agricultural breakthroughs, whether it's poetry, whether it's architecture that's lasted the vestiges of time like none of our current modern architecture probably would? We throw all of these societies of the past down the drain when we look at all of they have to offer us, and we just denounce them as being stupid and that they actually believed the earth was flat. That is a grave injustice. A grave injustice of just pure logic, that you can take all of these things from societies of the past and accept them in rote form and say that those are the building blocks for how we've come to the level of awareness that we have in our current century, day and age. And then we just cancel it out to zero and say, well, they believe the earth was flat, but that's so obviously wrong. There's no way that you can separate their belief in a flat earth from the reality that we are all living in, that is based off of the advancements and societal changes and literary works and mythological figures or biblical figures that everything has been shaped by in the present. People in the health industry will say you are what you eat. Well, we are what we have had as a history, except for one thing in the modern era. We have this fallacy of believing in the modern era that we are so brilliant, so technologically advanced, that we are completely in the know of everything to do with our planet. But the reality couldn't be farther from the truth. In the ancient world, everybody knew what they could observe. In the modern reality, it's not what people can observe that they believe. They believe what others tell them. And this other group is a very small, very, very small group of people. In the ancient world, people could see the reality of the created excellence around them and build their framework of belief based off of actual observable fact. But nobody does that anymore. Everything that we view as fact is written by somebody that we never proved for ourselves. It got into a textbook without our permission, without our knowing it was true or not. We simply read it and we're supposed to spew it back out and say, oh, that's why that is. Okay. But we never looked it in the eye and saw if it was the truth. We never observed it. We just trusted somebody else's word for it. And I think that is the gravest mistake in the current modern era, in that we have learned to trust and not validate what the truth may actually be. And indeed, it's been a fallacy of mankind from the beginning. But it's even more on display in our current era, when we can say that everything we are today is based off of the steps that mankind has made in the past, and then we completely obliterate the base plane of what the past was based on, and say that that was errant, wrong, a fallacy, it was ignorance on their part. And yet all the best parts of the past are based off of those people in the past who believed what they did in order to shape the future. There has been a complete disconnect in reality in terms of logic. How we view ourselves as detached from our ancestors, and that the same rules do not apply to us that they did to them. In reality, we in the modern era are playing a game by a set of somebody else's rules, because they aren't rules of logic, they aren't rules of science, they aren't rules of observational fact. They're rules that no one is supposed to question. They're rules that are just there because they're there, and you need to believe them because somebody said so, and if you don't, then you'll be labeled crazy. They're supposedly there as rules to keep us safe. In modern cinema, it's almost a joke that if for whatever reason in the plot you get pulled into an SUV by suspicious suit-dressed people, and you're wondering why you're there. Why have you been nabbed off the street? And they assure you that there's nothing wrong. They're just simply going to take you to a safe place. And that you need to trust them. And that it's okay because they work for the government. Well, the code for safe place is they're going to kill you. And I fear, as a person who has researched this topic, has delved into it deeply, has written a book on it, that there really is a basis of logic to show that people are in grave danger. Because if people do not have a connection with their past, people do not value the past, then they can't learn from it. Instead, they see themselves as superior from it. And if they're superior from it, then they're unteachable. And if they're unteachable, then, worst of all, the mistakes that have been made in the past will be replicated in the future in an even greater scale than they may have been in the past, when people could at least be checked and bounded by the observations of a reality of existence that they knew was created. They didn't believe in a big bang. They didn't believe that everything came out of nothing, in the sense that there was a big gene soup pool and then a mutation occurred and boom, 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 and almost all of a sudden there's planets and galaxies and it's ever expanding and there's no explanation for it. There's no God involved, of course. That is the conspiracy. They want to remove God from the picture. They want to become the ability to rule it out by science, to write a history that was never there. Because the history we have today, that scientists have told you of the Earth, of the everything from in our terms of the cosmos picture that they have painted, everything that they call a history is not the history of any civilization on this planet older than 500 years, and for in some cases much sooner than that, in terms of the Chinese dynasty, the observers of the royal observatories, who firmly believed in a flat earth. There is a grave danger for people, their eternal fate even, when the point of emphasis of the knowledge that was known as commonplace knowledge of the past is taken out of perspective and is labeled as something silly or stupid in the modern context, when in reality that knowledge of the past was the best indicator of what we have to know to rule our future. And so we have the majority of the Earth's population today believing that we're a hunk of rock 3 places out from a sun that's 109 times larger than Earth, that somehow has this amazing gravity and it would pull Earth into it in an instant, but Earth is moving so fast in a rotation around it that the inertia holds the Earth from being sucked into it. And yet, if we came within a couple degrees, all life on Earth would be impossible. But meanwhile, we have this smaller moon orbiting us that is so powerful in its effects on Earth that it can move the tides of the seas. The water can come in and go out, all based on the power of the moon. And yet, this same moon is somehow not sucked into the sun, but it's held close to Earth. And yet, 5 places out from Earth, from the sun I should say, we have a planet, supposedly, that's 2.5 times the mass of all of the other planets combined. And yet it's farther out in space, and it's still circling around the sun, but it's impossible to just logically explain. You couldn't sit down with an ancient scribe and explain our modern context of what we believe is our planetary view of a heliocentric model of today. They would laugh. Just as crowds laugh today at the notion of there being people that believe the earth is flat. These ancient cultures as a whole would laugh. They would wonder what side of the bed modern culture had gotten up from. Because there are so many tests, so many proofs, so many realities that you can discover through so many different YouTube channels, through even books that have been written, including my own, that you can test all of the modern practices of why you should believe the earth is a ball, spinning madly about in a seemingly meaningless galaxy because it's only one of any infinite number of other ones that are all spinning away madly in a nightmarish dream world of make-believe. They would laugh, these ancient cultures, at us today, because we have truly forgotten our fathers. We just took all of the knowledge they had to give us, and we threw it down the drain. And we said, we know our own thing. It's a new era. It's a modern era. We're going to believe a new thing. We are going to separate ourselves from the past. We are going to communicate with one another. And we are going to all think the same way. And we are all going to be one in communication, word, thought, and deed. And we are going to imagine a boundless existence for ourselves. And when you take that kind of an underlying problem within society's makeup, then you are going to have to fabricate the science to prove it. Because not everyone is going to logically just go along with the flow. There's going to be those who question it. And so you have to create a framework for those who question it to be satisfied. And the problem right now with this whole flat earth, spinning ball earth debate is because the early attempts to promote that science, to put that science in place to satisfy everybody, to make sure that nobody would question too much, wasn't very well done. But it was good enough for the people at the time. But the problem, looking back now, which can be so well portrayed in NASA's differing views of the Earth, where the United States suddenly becomes bigger than South America, and that South America can't even exist in the same planet, to now that it's back to midget-sized, to the reality that Africa's never been shown as large as it is, and somehow Greenland morphs in and out of sizes. The list goes on. But this is NASA's views of Earth as portrayed over several years. It's one of the easiest ways to just look for yourselves as an individual and say, I don't feel very safe in what I'm seeing if this is what the government is telling me is where I am in this reality, if this is where I'm located, because they obviously don't have a clear picture of it. But they told me to trust them, that this picture is where you are, this is where you're at, this is what it looks like. And yet, it's not. There are lies on top of lies, on top of lies, on top of lies. And they were all meant to deceive people at a certain point in time. And then the story went on, and the explanations had to get more and more and more incredulous. Until the current day and age, in our current day, some over 50 years since we supposedly put a man on the moon, we have the same NASA scientists that receive a budget of over billions and billions of dollars. We have representatives from NASA saying that we no longer possess the technology to safely get a human through the Van Allen belts in order to revisit the moon. It's completely ridiculous. Where did we lose this advanced technology with a budget of that many billions of dollars? Where are all of the original films of the moon landings that they also say have all mysteriously disappeared? I mean, you can lose a DVD in your house quite easily. I have 4 kids, and through each of the kids getting up to about 2 years of age, they all, for some strange reason, think it's the funnest thing in the world to throw a DVD away in the trash. So it's very understandable how in a normal household you can lose something when you have little kids wandering around. But it's a lot bigger picture to stretch. How, with a billion dollar budget, you misplace the film that actually traveled out off of Earth and came back to it? It's really hard to accept that you just forgot the locker key for where you put that film. Just as it's really hard to believe that you donated a moon rock to a university that actually came from the moon when that same rock is analyzed and it's found that it's quite native to Earth and is actually an Earth rock. When you have all of these lies that are so obvious if you look at them all, but they're not if you don't look at them all. If you just go with what you see on your TV and what a very few are telling you about the shape and the attributes of where you live, then you will remain asleep, because unlike the past, unlike the ancestors that came before us, we don't live our lives anymore off of what we see around us. We live our lives off of what people say. And we are being led to hell. We are being led to abandon all self-reasoning logic, to the point where we are whatever we see. We have no individualistic thought. We are not capable of deductive reasoning. We cannot see that the math problem doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, then you've got to go back and you've got to find out where you went wrong. But people are content to, when they see an answer that doesn't reflect the equation that you arrived at, they don't think, it's too much to go back and look to see where you went off the path. So what if we don't have the correct answer? The answer's on the page. I can get so many wrong, it doesn't matter if a few of them are wrong. I'll still pass the class. That is the mentality of too many people who, when they get a wrong answer and they can prove it when they should have been right, they don't want to look at it to see what's wrong with it. They're content to live as they are. The problem with that is, when you are completely blind to reality like that, then you are completely blind to what could be waiting in store for you, because you have no ability to even see where you're at in history, in time, or what your position in the future is going to be, if you don't know where you are even at. If you have this completely skewed view of the cosmos to the point that it's laughable, scientifically provable, in that it is completely laughable that you should think as you think, what future do you have? What hope is there if you are so convinced that you know everything simply because somebody told you everything? There is an aspect of faith in believing what somebody tells you. I'm not saying that. But there is also an aspect that you should be able to see it come true. And when you see some things that have been told to you not come true, then the reality is somebody is lying. And if they keep lying, it keeps becoming a bigger problem and a bigger problem. And if they're so intent on keeping the truth from you, then there's a very good reason why that is. And that, I hope, you will come to see is why questions have to be asked. Why people have to consider things that they would never have before in wildest imaginations have ever thought that they could alter their view of life, as in to include belief in a flat earth system. But that's actually a healthy thing. A mind that can change and accept logic accept facts that it receives and say, wow, I was wrong. I really need to rethink this because your equation, it adds up. That's a healthy individual. That's who everyone should be. That's what people of the past did. They observed the facts around them, and that formed the basis of their common belief. And that's who we need to be more like, at least in that endeavor. And that won't happen as long as people continue not to question the reality of their surroundings and things that make absolutely no logical sense. Like, how do you get a moon buggy out of a satellite rover or a satellite module that doesn't even have a door big enough for it? Why? Why do people just take something like that and say that's too small, that's too inconsequential, that's just a small little errancy, that's nothing to be worried about. You can't just look at that, and you can't just throw everything out because of that. That isn't logical. No scientist trying to figure out nuclear fission is going to throw out a small errancy in his test calculations. That's gonna, if he sees that, he's going to stop because he knows he can't go further. He can't go further in the belief structure of where he's trying to arrive at a positive fusion event if he knows that there's an errancy back at step 2.3. There's no way that he can go through a 100-point checklist if he knows there's an error already at that point. It's not something you skip and go on. It's something you figure out. And you get a fix for it then, because there's no sense in going forward, because whatever you go forward with is going to be skewed. And therefore it is important at this point in human history that humans stop going down the track that they've been told is the way to go and actually look around and check out some observational data as to what really is the truth of everything. And there are so many ways that you can just look at your environment, whether it's the man-made parts of it, like a gyroscope and its application in showing a static plane that completely defies anything that you could call ball Earth, and keep a plane in the air and not have it smashing into outer space and burning up or plowing into the earth. Or you can just simply look at the Bible and you can see how the Bible says in verse after verse, it is fixed and immovable, it is fixed, it is immovable. The sun moves in its circuit around this and that. There are many Bible verses that prove a flat earth. There are many, many facts in the observable scientific sphere of life that prove a flat earth. And I can tell you all those things, and it makes no good. It does no good. It does no good until you actually go and look for yourself. It does no good until you actually ask yourself the question, could what you believe it be wrong? And then the only hope of a conclusion that is a favorable one for you is when that you can analyze input data and make a decision based off of that and not off of somebody else's opinion or what somebody told you. You have to evaluate what people tell you based off of other sources of information. To trust anyone with everything is a very bad idea. And I truly do hope that you will open your eyes, stop the car, and look at that flat horizon that stretches for as far as the eye can see in front of you, and ask the question, why can I see that skyscraper from a city line that's over what NASA tells me the Earth curvature should have it disappeared behind. Just simple little things that you can do, that you can test. And you'll arrive at answers that are not what you've been told. And then the choice is yours. How do you go with that? Do you stay asleep? Do you stay in the society, not mention anything about it? Or do you talk up about it? Do you maybe motivate somebody else to think about things? And maybe if you motivate enough people, and enough people think about things, then maybe it becomes an idea. And then the idea gains strength, and people, and more people, and platforms get behind it. And soon, you have a movement. And it's no longer stupid or crazy to believe as you do. But it takes getting out there to finding the truth before you can get there. And the reality of it is, anybody in the present that tells you that all the people in the past believed in a very stupid thing is not very believable, is it? As a Christian, being told that King David, for instance, was a very stupid person because he believed in a flat earth, because that's the belief of his time period, doesn't do me a lot of good in my faith as a Christian if I believe that the guy was so stupid and that my God is not loving enough to open him up to the idea of how he should be viewing the cosmos. And this is the lineage that my Savior, Jesus Christ, comes down through? How as a Christian can I stand behind a planetary heliocentric model when the very culture that all of the founding books of the Bible are out of was a flat earth believing culture? That's what the very words are based off of, the common knowledge of. And I'm going to call all of those prophets, I'm going to call Jesus himself stupid? I don't think so. And I don't think a lot of other people would either. But you're doing that when you go along with what a few people have said, and you don't question anything for yourself. And so I really hope, I really, really hope that you will take a chance, watch some videos, and there are many videos by many authors, and there's fewer books. Mine is one of them. Eric Dubay has one. There's others. You can go back to Samuel Rothbottom. You can find works to educate yourself. And that's exactly what you have to do. You have to take the facts that you do have in order to build the picture that you're not being shown. And I wish you the best with that. Sincerely, Gaius Stanton III, author of exciting Christian fiction, now fully being realized and envisioned within a flat earth, firmament-domed reality, with heaven above me and hell somewhere beneath me.